Hi, I'm Paul Duchesne. Welcome to Mama Paul's video podcast. Today is September the 18th, 2021. We're going to do part three of the neoliberalism riff that I've been doing for a couple of weeks. There's been a couple of week delay, and I apologize for that. It was our 57th anniversary. A week ago we went away, and it took me a week to recover from the week that we went away. So finally we're back on the air, and we're going to go, and along the way I heard a interview on the radio with Thom Hartman, who has a daily 3-hour show on the radio, and Richard Wolff, who has a 1-week show called Economic Update. So Richard Wolff is a Marxist, socialist, anti-capitalist, for sure, well thought out, half a dozen books out. He's always pumping out another book. And in fact, he was one of the main speakers that was down at the Occupy movement, invited there a few times. I've seen him speak on a number of occasions. He's well thought out, and presents himself very well. And most of the points he makes about capitalism are spot on in terms of pointing out the flaws in capitalism. Thom Hartman, he definitely points out the flaws in capitalism, but Thom himself is well, with the amount of businesses Thom Hartman has started over the last 20 years, if he's not a capitalist, I don't know anybody who is. So anyway, having said that, Richard opened up and they gave the new book he has out, that Richard Wolff has out, is called The Sickness is the System. The Sickness is the System. And basically, capitalism is the sickness that is causing any and all problems we have right now. That's his belief on that. I'm sort of more a little bit in the middle here, but the big deal was the liberal. So liberal in Europe means no government intervention and privatization. No government intervention and privatization. Whereas liberal in America is individual rights, civil liberties, democracy, and a free enterprise system. Most conservatives that I know and progressives that I know agree with individual rights, civil liberties, democracy, and free enterprise. You find shades of gray on both sides of these, separating the far right and the far left, which is sort of a discussion for another day. But the main thing is that we're confused about the word here in America for sure, which causes confusion on both sides of the camp. When I described neoliberalism, I said neo meaning new, and liberalism is a stand-in for classical economics. So neoliberalism is just a return to classical economics. And what happened to classical economics? Well, classical economics brought us the Great Crash of 1929. And the problems caused by the Great Crash of 1929 were solved with Keynesian economics. And John Maynard Keynes was an economist and a mathematician in England. And Samuelson was sort of a bit of a student of his. And what generated this whole discussion in the first place was the book Samuelson and Friedman. Samuelson being the proponent of Keynesian economics and Friedman being the neoclassical economics. And the subtitle of the book is The Battle over the Free Market. So there's a general agreement about free markets, and we're battling about whether they should be regulated or not regulated. Well, not regulating them led to, there were other crashes along the way, quite a few other crashes along the way. The system cycles in and out, and you'll wind up with some major crash happening every 7 years or 12 years, depending on which mathematician, economist that you spoke to who analyzed these things. But the big one was your 1929 crash. That was a real big one. And that led to 25% of the American population being unemployed, led to a drop. I think it was $60 billion in paper assets were dissolved within about a 2-week period. And it was hard to register in a hotel in Lower Manhattan without getting asked whether it was just temporary and you're going to be jumping out of the building or whether you're going to be staying for the night. Literally that was happening. There were so many people that had lost fortunes that could not live with themselves any longer. So that was a period in the Great Crash, and then along comes the New Deal, Keynesian economics. So we get a New Deal. So right in the middle of the Depression, unemployment insurance, Social Security. We get a minimum wage, and we get a government jobs program to create the dams and a lot of highway work. A tremendous amount of money gets pumped out by the government to build things. Well, when you give money to people who are working people, they spend the money. And the effect of that money multiplies. They call it a multiplier effect. The more money you save, the less money gets multiplied. The more money you spend, the more money gets multiplied. Wealthy people, corporations, when they get money, they tend to take it and put it in their pocket. They shove it in their pocket, or they rebuy back their stocks. But they don't spend most of it. They save 90% of it and spend about 10% of it, whereas the guy like me, the guy like you that are watching this, we get that kind of money, we spend 90% of it, and maybe we save 10% of it. During this period, an interesting tidbit, there was a major, really popular economist who was around in the 20s. And while this boom in the stock market is going on, everybody's taking they're borrowing money to buy stock on margins. This one fellow, he's a real noted economist, and he comes up with this thing that, well, if people would only save $15 a week, at the end of a 10-year period, they're going to have, and they invest all their money in the market. At the end of this, say, 10-year period, they're going to wind up with about $80,000 in the bank and monthly revenue coming in that's going to be suffice for their retirement. Well, for somebody in the 1920s to be saving $15 a week, they would be saving 50% of their income. 50% of their income. So this noted economist has, on one hand, he's coming up with all these numbers for how these people are going to be, these middle-class people are going to be wealthy. On the other hand, he has no concept of the reality of the day. The average worker is making $30 a week. How's he going to save $15 a week? What, are you kidding? Nuts. So within the field, you find a lot of crazy thinking. Just this last week, Jerome Powell, when he came out of one of the meetings, Jerome Powell talked about the inaccuracy of economic predicting. The inaccuracy, how it's not reliable. No kidding. No kidding. So we've got liberal in England, and liberal in England is privatization and no government intervention. Liberal in America is a slightly different feeling. Neoliberalism is going to be returned to the old classical economics. So from the 30s, as the New Deal gets implemented, we get Keynesian economics taking a firm hold in the American economy. It gets us out of the Depression, and then along comes World War II, which is really supercharges the whole deal. By the time we come out of World War II, the American economy is pumping, and we're also at a 90%. We're back into that 90% range of taxes. Back in World War I, you had the same thing. You had the 90% tax rates for the wealthy and the corporations, the 90% tax rates after World War II. Harding comes in, he wants to return to normal, get rid of these high tax rates, which paid for the war, which made a lot of these people really rich at the same time, and we dropped them back to the low 20%ers. Well, by the time we come out of World War II, we're back up to the 90% tax rates. The wealthy seem to be doing okay still. They're not exactly living in poverty. And the neoliberals, which is this new sort of term that they've come up with, and it was, I think, Friedman and another major economist, Hayek, who came up with the term neoliberalism, and they want to get those taxes back down and get the money flowing back to the top 1%. And want to return to the old ways. Well, in the 50s, we had the greatest growth in the middle class in the history of the world. And coming back from World War II, we had the educational program, which brought a lot of GIs into college. So suddenly there was this huge influx of regular people into the universities, which were not terribly expensive like they are today. And there were tremendous amount of state colleges and city universities, which were much less expensive, free in many cases. And in fact, that's how California grew. It was the free university system in California, which wound up creating Silicon Valley. It was in the 50s, 60s, these free universities, and now you couldn't afford to get lunch in the bloody some of these campuses. So the neoliberalism is wanting to come in and crush out the Keynesian economics. And during the 70s, we have a little bit of inflation, a little bit of stagflation starts. And back of me, if I still have it, we had 1975 is when the oil crisis happens. 1975 is the oil crisis. That's when Saudi Arabia and Israel are at war. We side with Israel. Saudi Arabia cuts back on oil and on oil production, increases the prices, and we have a huge inflation, and whoa, the right-wing conservatives are biting at the bit to discredit Keynesian economics, which happens with the oil crisis, at which point they start to institute neoliberalism from 75 on. But Margaret Thatcher is there, and by the time Ronald Reagan comes in the 80s, these are the full-blown proponents of deregulation. In fact, I don't remember the exact quote that Reagan used to say, but something to the effect of, what's the biggest thing you have to worry about? It's when a government agent knocks on your door. The whole point that they were trying to make was that government doesn't work. Government doesn't work, and you got to get government off your back. Well, tell that to the guy that's at the police station, the fire station, the guy that's writing the checks at the Department of Motor Vehicles. Government doesn't. Government works. Government works. Business works. Some bureaucracies are worse than others. Some bureaucracies can get really, really bad. And it's happening, just to be honest, in California right now with the DMV. When I first got here in 75, the DMV was a marvel compared to New York. Now it's a nightmare compared to back east. So things go through various cycles. Same thing with even large corporations. When I first started working at AT&T, I had this weird notion that there was some kind of democracy existing within the system. Shortly I found out, no, this is totally top-down fascism, no doubt about it. Globalization was also one of the keynote factors that was part of the neoliberal agenda. They basically wanted to spread this lack of government regulation and privatization around the whole planet. So in 1975, I talked on earlier shows about the Powell Memo. Well, this is all sort of interconnected. So the Powell Memo laid the groundwork for the creation of the think tanks, which then completely supported this whole neoliberal economic agenda. And the idea was more business gets into government and less government in business. So we wanted to get the business world more involved with the government, who was making regulations about them. And we wanted to get less government involved in the business world. So that was the concept. The concept was get the business to take over the government and get the government out of business. So this was basically the whole philosophy going on, which leads to inevitably to the Glass-Steagall Act. The elimination of the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act, which happens in, I think it's 1999. Bill Clinton is in, and Bill Clinton is a complete. He's a fixture from Wall Street, okay? Bill Clinton walked into the convention. He didn't stand a chance of winning that convention. And that was when the Labor was still in charge of the Democratic Party. And it was still a Wild West show watching a Democratic convention where you had all sorts of labor and teachers and workers and different, all your little indigenous, all your different minority groups sort of got together into the Democratic Party. Well, Wall Street saw an opening here, and they came in big time, and they literally bought the Democratic Party back in the 1990. I don't remember the exact year of that convention, but it was Glass-Steagall was 99. So Bill Clinton gets nominated by the takeover of the DNC, and he winds up becoming president. And he is Chicago School of Economics. He's a total Milton Friedman, total Milton Friedman, Chicago School of Economic economist, and you want to get rid of deregulation. Well, Glass-Steagall, since 1933, has held the whole banking system together. So they repealed Glass-Steagall, and by 2008, and in that period, we wind up transferring $7 trillion. $7 trillion in that period between the Glass-Steagall and the crash of 2008. $7 trillion gets transferred from the 99% to the 1%ers. Huge transfer of wealth. This is the death and the end of this growth of the whole middle class. And for Reagan and his deregulation, you could trace it back to the air controller strike when they fired all the air controllers, and that was the end. That was the beginning of the end of the unionization push. And now you got Glass-Steagall. So by the time we're entering 2000, the banks are going wild. People are buying on margins, real estate bubbles, all sorts of little economic things invented in order to get people to get more money on margins, which leads to the whole 2008 crash of the economy. And we wind up with a situation where the neoliberalism is not looking so good anymore. So between then and now, because Trump was the complete total pro-business neoliberalist who talked out of one side of his mouth about other issues to the people who didn't have the money, and talks out of the other side of his mouth to the people who do have the money. But there's been this trickle of sort of anti-neoliberalism floating around till finally we have Joe Biden, he's in the White House, and we've got a $1-point-something trillion package already passed, and now we're looking at passing a $3.7 trillion, probably won't wind up with that, but anyway, they want to get another big government influx of money in order to keep this whole system going. And if we do, the middle class people will wind up in much better shape than they were 2 years ago or 6 months ago, even, if they get any of this stuff through, which they may or may not because of the craziness going on the outside here with the collapse of the Republican Party and the new Trump Party, which seems to be just barreling ahead. So we have an argument between the Keynesians and the neoliberals. And just to look at the book one more time, the battle over the free market. So the battle over the free market is where we're at. And so I just wanted to run this little bit by to sort of review what Richard Wolff talked about on Thom Hartman's show. And I put off getting into the Samus and Friedman book. I've been reading it. It's really interesting, their lives and how they intersect each other, and what they had in common and what they were different about. But the point of all this is that we're still talking about capitalism as the main framework. Now, just the other day, I picked up a new copy of the New York Review of Books, and in there, Thomas Piketty, who we've talked about a number of times, Capital in the 21st Century, Capital and Ideology. He has a new book out, and it's Time for Socialism. Dispatches from the World on Fire. Dispatches from the World on Fire. So the word socialism in Europe doesn't have a terribly bad meaning at all. In fact, you've got democratic socialist and democratic socialism. It's pretty common. In America, socialism doesn't sound good. The word doesn't work well. Now, socialism for the corporations is one way a lot of people derogatorily refer to the money that corporations get back, because they do. When the corporations lose money, the government comes in and bails them out. When people lose money, the government they did this last time around. There was, because of the COVID, there was a government relief of a lot of poor people, which has kept people out of the poverty level. But in general, the government is there day one to bail out the corporations, and not generally there to do a whole lot for your average people. So this is sort of where I feel like what's happening is suddenly the opening for socialism, if that's the right word, and that's where I have a problem with this. Just like in Europe, liberalism means one thing and it means something else here. Socialism in Europe means one thing, and here it has a lot of negative baggage associated with it. The 50s and the whole red baiting, and there's a communist in every branch of this government here. Madman waving his House Un-American Activities Committee stuff around. All that left a really, really bad imprint on the whole American mind. And when we go back to that period, it's really interesting to note that the forces that were in charge in the government, especially the Dulles brothers, who created, so we got Secretary of State and the guy that's creating the CIA. These guys were bringing Nazis from Germany, from the German government, into America. There was a whole plot by the Dulles brothers to try to save Germany at the very end. The Devil's Chessboard, wonderful book. You want to get into this. The Devil's Chessboard, unbelievable book. And maybe we'll talk about it another occasion. I just happen to fit the bill right now. So we've had this right wing going on. We also have the embedded racism in America, the white supremacy thing in America. And the whole country is built on slavery and white supremacy. And in terms of economics as a science or a philosophy, the original concepts were that there was land, labor, and capital, and that these were equally distributed. Well, I'll give you a clue. Labor is not equal to capital and land. The land and capital wind up getting put together into the same category at this point in time. It used to be landowners were one group and your non-land owning aristocrats were a different group. That sort of joined together. You've got labor against everybody else. And as Piketty points out in the Capital in the 21st Century book, the rate of return on labor is never equal to the rate of return on capital. Capital always makes more money than labor will ever make. So you're not going to get rich working for a living. So there's an unequal distribution between this land, labor, and capital concept, which is one aspect that keeps floating around in my mind here. And capitalism itself is a continuous oscillation between ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs. Because as soon as you have an opening one place, well, for instance, right now, because of the climate crisis, generators are becoming in vogue. Everybody needs my daughter has a generator at her house. My relatives back east all have generators back at the house. The restaurant I work in the event of a power failure, we have a huge generator to run the whole restaurant. People are buying more generators as the climate crisis gets worse and worse and worse. So there's an opportunity within capitalism. They're going to take money from here and move it over to there, and so these people will have themselves protected. Well, as these monies transfers around, somebody who's working over here suddenly is out of a job. Somebody over here, we need a new technical skill to get in this job. Are they going to retrain the person to get them over here? Are they going to take the person whose job they're losing and retrain them to get them over here? Not even close. Not even close. It's not going to happen. As somebody who worked at AT&T during the transition from hardwiring to digital, from analog to digital, as this transformation took place, and they were sort of disenfranchising hundreds, if not thousands, of workers within AT&T and getting rid of them. As they digitized, they needed less and less people to do this, and they needed some smaller number of people to do these other jobs. Did they retrain them? No, they didn't. I was there right in the middle of this whole thing. I was on a committee that was involved with looking at these issues. And what you got from the top was, yeah, we're going to retrain all these people. No, they weren't. They got rid of all these people. They replaced them with new hires, and these were all the union people they got rid of. So this is what happens within a normal, regular, smooth-running capitalist system. You get a new demand for something over here. Whatever you had going over here that you had to have yesterday, but now you don't need. Well, you replace these workers, boom, let's get rid of them. hire new ones. It will cost us less money to put the new ones in here. Where's the safety net for these people? Now, you could say that, unemployment insurance is one thing, and the unemployment insurance goes for so long, and a lot of people aren't even covered by unemployment insurance in today's market with the new gig economy, or screw you economy. So these oscillations are going up and down. What is going to come in and replace it? I don't know. I really, honest to God, don't know. I know that there's enough out there for all of us to share, and we need to rethink the whole thing. So along the way, hopefully I'm going to bring out some of these other issues that are ways to maybe introduce some new thinking into here. But what concerns me is the actual wording, and the wording is important because we live in a bumper sticker kind of society where bumper sticker slogans wind up being the norm of the day. And that's where I'm going to leave it today. Yes Magazine had a really, and I don't have it in front of me, a really good issue, How Enough is Enough. So I'm usually showing Adbusters Magazine and some of the more disheartening representations of where we're at. But Yes Magazine is a journal of positive futures, and their big thing was there's enough on the planet to share, and they had various articles in there about housing and how we can share food and water and all these essential things. But it's a philosophical change that's really necessary, which is why the little chart that, let me just put this over here for a second on the sideboard. Put on the sideboard. This was an old chart. You've seen it a few times, and I should make a new version of it up. What I am calling for is a new spiritual political economy as opposed to the political economy we have right now, which is capitalism. So I'm suggesting that we're going to move into a more we have to. If we don't, we're going to kill ourselves. We're on a path of extinction, no doubt about it. The democracy and the capitalism are collapsing. And one of the, I've always called this democratic capitalism, the term I've used, that term you frequently hear used. But it's not really democratic capitalism. There's nothing about capitalism that's democratic. It's capitalist democracy. That's what it is. It's capitalist democracy, not democratic capitalism. So these things are collapsing, as are religion in general. We have these, God knows what the Christian right is all about. They're a bunch of crazies over there. And I don't know what principles they have other than believing whatever it is their local mega church leader, as he's collecting his money, talks about. So I've said before, I see a political economy and a new spiritual vision emerging. Slowly, little sprouts of hope are coming through the cracks, and hopefully I'm going to be able to maybe split my time talking, splitting my time between the collapsing and the growing new. That's my goal. That's what I used to try to do, and I'm going to try to do it a little more. So this was a little bit of a diversion towards the end, but mostly we covered neoliberalism, part 3, and that's it for the night. Peace, patience, persistence, and we'll see you as soon as we can. Thanks for joining.